Attached. New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love by Amir Levine, MD, and Rachel S.F. Heller, MA. This is a really good book, I think, for everybody. We all have romantic relationships, you know. It's one of the most important things in life is you find that partner, someone who's going to be your girlfriend, your wife, or obviously if you're a woman, your husband, your boyfriend, or you know whatever partner you have. It's really important to understand the dynamics of a relationship, and because it's not just you, it's not just about you, it becomes about you and the other person. So I found this really interesting, really good book because it's a scientific book. It's written by these two doctors or psychiatrists. These are two very esteemed people who looking at the science of human relationships. And one thing that this book really does break down is how we have kind of three kind of personality attachment styles when it comes to romance. So when you're in a relationship with somebody, a romantic relationship with somebody, you fall under one of these three categories. So the first one is anxious. So anxious people, they often preoccupied with their relationship and tend to worry about their partner's ability to love them back. So I don't know if you've been in a relationship where someone's very attached, quote unquote, attached to you, like they want to know what you're doing all the time. They want to be close to you all the time. They're very intimate. You know, they love hugging and kissing and, you know, closeness, you know. And I think that's it. And they can be very loving, but at the same time, they can worry a lot. So they're worried about where you are. They might think you're cheating if you don't answer their phone or text quickly, you know. But what this book goes into depth about is these people have a certain this attachment style, and there's ways to reassure them, and how a lot of there's a lot of miscommunication in relationships, why a lot of relationships do break down. I can obviously speak from my own experiences of like successful relationships and unsuccessful relationships I've had, and I think that the main problem was the fact that there was a lack of communication or in certain areas, you know. I mean, overall, my romantic relationships have been great. You know, I've had great relationships, but they haven't been. They've obviously had their problems. You know, relationships I have, they're great, but at the same time, you see like where the problems they occurred because of a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of what that other person's going through, or a lack of communication on my part of me expressing certain things that I'm going through, or how I operate in a relationship versus how they operate, and it causes that kind of like clash that sometimes it's not actually what you think it is, because we don't understand these attachment styles. So the other one is avoidant, which is an attachment style I thought I was, but I was wrong. So avoidant people equate intimacy with a loss of independence and consistently try to minimize closeness. So a lot of these people who are avoidant, what they do like to do is they like to have their independence. So they don't want to be tied down. They're not so eager to you know make things official, and they might be a bit distant from their partner. They want space. The people who are avoidant and the people who are anxious, when they get together, there's a lot of conflict with that, because the anxious people, they want to be close, whereas the avoidant people want distance. So that can cause a lot of tension, but it also causes a lot of excitement. So sometimes the anxious person might mistake that for love, because or lust, more lust than it actually is, because it's exciting, it's interesting, it's triggering their attachment style, and it goes into detail in the book. And then there's the last but not least is the secure attachment style. So these are people who feel comfortable in intimacy, and they're usually warm and loving. And according to these authors, majority of people in romantic relationships are, well, 50% of the population are actually secure. So they don't get jealous easily. They're loving, they're caring, they trust their partner, they're not wondering where they are all the time. They know how to reassure their partner. They call it kind of like the perfect gene pool of romance kind of thing. But and there was a lot of, it seemed like when I was reading this book, it felt like these people are like perfect when it comes to romantic relationships, and we all know everyone has issues and occurs problem come across problems in romantic relationships, as well as having a great relationship with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or romantic partner. So it was interesting because when I was reading this, it was mainly seemed like it was focused on the anxious and the avoidant and how they can overcome a lot of the issues that they have, which I'll go into. There's a lot of detail regarding that. But again, those anxious and avoidant people, romantic personality types. They're also not negative things. They're things that you're naturally inclined. You have a natural inclination towards that for several reasons. It's not just as well, because there's this dynamic in psychology where they talk about how you are with your mother or your father, or your upbringing will determine how you are with your romantic partner. And although there is some element of truth to that, there's a lot of disproven points actually that there's a lot more elements to it than just that. That can be one factor, but it's not necessarily a determining factor in how somebody is in a romantic relationship. But I mean, it can obviously affect how they are in a romantic relationship, but it's not necessarily this majoring factor that a lot of society believes that the relationship with your parents is necessarily. It's not necessarily or your upbringing. It's not necessarily your attachment style will be dictated by how you are how you were with your family, or your mum or your dad. So that was interesting to read about. Now there's a test that you can take that they've devised. It's like a questionnaire. It's like a personality questionnaire. So you answer these several questions regarding relationships, your past relationships, current relationship, and you talk, and it goes through like a questionnaire. I don't know how many questions there were, maybe 30, 40 questions. I can't remember now. And I took the test, and like I said, I thought I would have been the avoidant type, because in beginning of relationships, I'm not necessarily jumping straight in. I like to take things slow, because if I'm investing in this person, I'm going to invest in them. I'm not going to cheat on them. I'm going to mess around. I'm not going to abandon them. I'm going to be with that person, through their faults. I want to see their faults as well as the rosy side, because you have that romantic period maybe of 2 to 3 months when you start dating somebody and everything's just perfect, and you love each other, and you really like lovey-dovey, and you want to be close and all of that, sex and all that kind of stuff. But what I find is that I tend to just go about it slowly. It's always great at the beginning, it's always great in a relationship, but I tend to ease my way into becoming serious with a woman before it might take me a little time to just jump in. So I thought, oh, that makes me an avoidant type, and I value my independence. I like to do my own thing as well, but I love doing things with a partner as well. I love being close to my romantic partner. But what I actually found out is I'm actually secure. And I was a little surprised at first, because I thought, really? Because they're making these secure people sound perfect, and I'm far from perfect, you know what I mean? But as I was reading the book, and as I was looking at some of the attributes of secure people, I found that actually that's quite true. I am actually a secure romantic partner, and because I don't tend to get jealous. Obviously we all have our moments of jealousy, our moments of being peed off and angry with our partner, or upset, or frustrated, and all those things that sometimes we blow way too much out of proportion, because it's just elements, and it does talk about that in the book. It's just elements of two different people coming together. You're gonna have that, and sometimes we blow those things too much out of proportion, especially when we don't understand what each other's attachment styles are, and how to kind of cater to that other person and to synergize with that other person. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't tend to get jealous, or I don't tend to. I tend to be quite loving. I tend to, as best as I can, meet my partner's needs. But again, doesn't necessarily mean that these people are perfect, because I'm far from that. I'll tell you that now. I've made loads of mistakes, and I continue to make loads of mistakes in relationships. I've not been perfect by any means at all. So when I was reading this book, I was kind of like, because obviously I knew my attachment style before I read the book, I was looking at it, and I was looking at the anxious and then the avoidant, and I was like, yeah, okay, cool. It's great that we're tackling a lot of their issues, but where's the issues with the secure people? And because it just seems like these people are the perfect people to have in romantic relationships, and they are good to have in romantic relationships, because when an anxious person or an avoidant person ends up with a secure person, it makes them more secure, at least for a period of time. But what can happen for a secure person is, if they're not careful, that they can start to become anxious or avoidant, if they're not in tune with, if they lose consistency in the relationship. It will, and I've found that to be the case for myself, because most of the time, again, I am secure, but I have had moments of being anxious in relationships at a certain point, or avoidant, like I said, maybe towards the beginning a little bit. So again, that attachment style by no means means that you're perfect if you are that, and the other two doesn't mean that you're not a good partner. So don't really take it like that. Because I can say, from doing the survey and finding out I'm secure, I'm definitely not the perfect partner. There's no such thing. It's not a fairy tale. And one of the things it actually mentioned was something about unconditional love, because this is the other belief that I found I had or have with someone who is with a partner who they're close to, who's the one, which there isn't really, I mean, in my opinion, a one. There is like many people that you can have a strong, close relationship with, romantic relationship with, and I've had a few, and I appreciate every single one of them. But and I know I'm gonna have more, and I still have some today. But it's like, what it is it's not an unconditional love that you have for that person. You have to work on the relationship. You have to continue working on the relationship, and we can all get complacent. You're comfortable with somebody, you have your flaws, but you don't work on the flaws, or you don't work on that relationship as much as you did at the beginning in a certain period of time. Maybe you're going through other things, and then you let that affect the relationship, even though it's not really about the relationship. It can affect the relationship, etc., etc. And I'm just talking from my own experience anyway. But one of the beliefs I had was, if you're in a romantic relationship, you should it shouldn't necessarily be perfect. This person should want to be with you through thick and thin. And I'd still believe that to be the case. Loyalty is very important for me in terms of a romantic partner, because I'm a loyal person to my friends, my family, and definitely to my romantic partner. So I'm going to be loyal no matter what. But that's not necessarily the case as well, because the only unconditional love that we have, according to these authors, is the unconditional love that we have for our children. So if you have kids, then you're going to have unconditional love for them, but not necessarily your husband or your wife, or your girlfriend or partner, whatever. You're not going to have necessarily have the same level of unconditional love that you have for them as you do for your children. So it's something to bear in mind that you have to constantly, obviously, be improving yourself for your partner and the relationship as a whole. And obviously, these are all things we know logically, but sometimes you need to step back and say, it's not about what I know, it's about what I'm applying and what I'm actually doing, because relationships are one of the most complex things that you, especially romantic relationships, one of the most complex things that we as human beings go through, you know. And yeah, it made me think a lot about that, you know, because I like one of the relationships that I've seen in the media that I admire, just as one example. There are many, but one example, and there's no such thing as perfect relationship. Obviously, there's everyone has their problems. You don't really see what's happening behind closed doors and everything. But between UFC fighter Conor McGregor and his girlfriend, one of the things I admire about her, his girlfriend, she stuck with him before he was famous, before he was rich, before he was successful in mixed martial arts, when he had nothing, when nobody believed in him, when he was like a nobody. His family didn't even believe in him, but she stuck by him, you know. She would support him in his training, help him with his nutrition. She would be like, when he was down, she'd be like, come on, Connor, you can do it. I believe in you. She stuck by him, you know, when he was going for training, you know, they would drive together to training, and they would talk about, you know, what he's achieved now, you know, about being the two-weight UFC world champion and how he's going to do that. And this was long before he was even anyone on the radar. And she stuck with him all through thick and thin. And you see it in, obviously, the media now. She's always by his side. And he mentions that, you know, now, obviously, he's had all the success. He's featherweight champion, lightweight champion, UFC champion. He's admired by millions of people. You know, he's made millions of dollars. He's had a lot of success, and now he's rewarding her in a sense. So she's being rewarded for that loyalty, and that's how I think it should be. Because I think that there's a lot of women and men who only want to be with someone once they're successful or once things are great, you know. But before then, they don't have that vision, that foresight to say, hey, maybe I can build an empire with this person, you know, and I can be with them before all that happens. I can be with them while things are tough, you know. I can be with them, I can get through the disagreements and the mismatches that you're going to naturally have with two different people coming together. And I think for me, that's what I look for in a partner. I look for that. I more than anything else. Obviously, looks and all the physical attraction, that's a given. That happens at the beginning. That's part that you can't. Without that, you don't have a romantic relationship. But it goes when you're talking about a serious girlfriend or a wife. That's what I look for. I look for loyalty. I look for this person. They're gonna stick through with me through thick and thin. You know, and that's how I find most of my friends are. You know, they've been there for me when I was down, as well as when things are going great. Not just when things are great. But it was another thing to think about for me in terms of actually you still need to work on the relationship even when, you know, for that to happen, because people aren't just going to necessarily unconditionally love you, you know, just because you're you, you know, or because things have been great, because they can be great for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, and then all of a sudden that person can just decide they don't want to be with you because you did something, and then they let it pile up and they didn't express that they were feeling that way, or because you made a mistake, or because you were complacent and you weren't as loving as you should be that month and it really hurt them. And so there's a lot of things to think about in regards to romantic relationships, and this book, it really goes into really good detail regarding the different types of romantic partners and how you should be able to identify what your partner is by their behavior. You know, like avoidance, for example, they'll avoid, like, if, for example, I don't know, say that old thing about the toilet seat. You know, us men were terrible at putting down the toilet seat. At least most of us are. And if you're living with your partner, or you just going to your partner's place or whatever, and you're not putting down the toilet seat, and she doesn't, you know, she doesn't say anything, but she keeps it pent up, and then one day you're having an argument about something completely different, and she'll bring that up as a point, and it's not even necessarily that that's been bothering her. That's been bothering her, but it's not necessarily that it's that big of a problem, because in hindsight it's not a massive problem, but it would have been a less of a problem if it had been addressed the first time. You know, so look, love, I really don't like it when you leave the toilet seat down, and then the person might not even know. They might not even be thinking of it, because we're all got our own selfish needs and thoughts, and you might not even be thinking about, oh, you know, maybe my girlfriend won't like it if I put the toilet seat, if I leave the toilet seat up, maybe I should put it down. So avoidant people will avoid bringing up that conflict, and they'll let it pile up until months later it explodes into something massive, and you know, all the little things that you've been doing, including that toilet seat, just pile up into one big thing that becomes a bigger problem than it really should have. With like the anxious, they, like I said, they might be the person that wants to always be in contact, you know, all the time. Oh, I need to be in contact. I need to be in contact. Oh, why is he not texting me back? Why is she not texting me back? That kind of thing. So if you don't text back immediately, they get worried or upset, or they might think you're cheating. And this can be addressed by just a sort of reassurance and understanding that your partner is that way. And there's different ways of dealing with that, which the book goes over. It was really interesting to just see how different people behave in relationships, and it goes for over a lot of what the book does well is it has a lot of case studies, so different couples and their different relationship styles, and how there's a conflict within those relationship styles, because the avoidant isn't understanding what the avoidant isn't understanding what the anxious person needs are, and the anxious person isn't understanding what the avoidant person's needs are. Say with the whole thing about closeness, like the anxious person needs a lot more, like a lot more love and tender care. They want to be hugged and they want to be close to their partner, whereas the avoidant needs their space. They need a bit of space. You know, it's not to say that they're not loving, but at the same time they don't necessarily want, it doesn't make them feel comfortable to be close all the time. So there needs to be obviously compromises, but there also needs to be understanding of that. So, and with the secure people, again, they tend to bring out a lot of a secure element in both the avoidant and the anxious people, which is why they're the best people to partner up with in a relationship, you know. And another point, the anxious tend not to, and the avoidants particularly, I think it was saying, don't tend to partner up with each other a lot. They don't, because their romantic personalities really clash. And they're both trying to one up each other by being the avoidant. You know, oh, you know, I'll text them later. Oh, I won't go and see them today, kind of thing. So they don't really tend to last long. They don't really tend to match too much. So, but one of the things about the anxious avoidant relationships they found is that the anxious and avoidant people, when they get together, they have a lot of problems. Not necessarily, and it's not necessarily that they shouldn't be together either. But one of the things is that it causes a interesting dynamic within that relationship, because again, one person wants distance and another person wants closeness, so it's a very difficult relationship to maintain, even though some people might stay in relationships for like 5, 6, 7 years together, and they have those two attachment styles. And another mistake that a lot of avoidant people and anxious people, romantic types, make is when they come across someone who's secure, they can mistake it for boredom, or for because there's no conflict, there's no excitement there in that sense. They're mistaking their conflict for the conflict that they have, and that attachment mechanism that gets fired up in them as lust or love, or when it's not really. It's their attachment style being fired up, because the secure person doesn't necessarily trigger those emotions. Then sometimes they miss out on good people who are secure, that they could have had a good relationship with. They might have been in a secure relationship. I mean, you might be one of those people. Maybe I don't know if I have dated anyone secure. I mean, if you're watching this and I dated you, maybe you are secure, but not that it's something obviously I've just read this week, so it's something I'm really thinking about. But if you're in a if you've been in a relationship before and you've been with a secure person, you might have let go of someone really good. And I ain't necessarily talking about myself, all right? But you might have let go of someone really good, because a lot of the times the dynamic between secure and the other avoidant and anxious types, there's certain emotions that aren't necessarily brought out in the secure, that are in the avoidant and anxious, which is, and it explains as well a lot why people can be in relationships that don't work out, or that are not that don't where they're not working, but they're staying in destructive relationships just because it's convenient, or because they're feeling a certain way that they're misinterpreting. And another thing about the attachment styles, both men and women can be anxious, avoidant, and secure. But there is a misconception in society. They mention it in the book. They said that there's a misconception in society that a lot of people associate masculinity with avoidant behavior. The whole independence, I don't need the woman, I'm on my mission kind of thing. And that's a dangerous thing for a lot of women to do, because when they come across a secure or an anxious male, then they might think that they're not masculine enough for them, and then they leave them when actually they were a good match for that person. So that's another trap that you can fall into. Sometimes it's true and they shouldn't have been with that person, but a lot of the time it's not, because they don't understand these dynamics of relationships. We don't understand this. We haven't, if you haven't studied it, and really looked at human behavior and how human psychology works, and how we are attached to our romantic partners. But the other thing as well is, on the flip side of that, associating women with being anxious, always needing to be close to their lover, and wanting to text and call all the time. It's not necessarily always the case. Although I've found that to be, maybe I've just dated a lot of anxious women, I don't know, but I found that they always tend to want to call and text and be close to me, and want to spend time with me, which is great. I think I have dated a few avoidant women, but not that many in comparison to anxious. But I have to say, now I know that I am a secure person in romantic relationships. I have noticed though, in majority of my relationships, that the women have ended up being very secure, and I've had good relationships with them. So then, because like the book describes, it says when you're with a secure person, you become more secure. So that was an interesting point to look at. But again, I've noticed that I have had elements of the anxious and the avoidant when I've been with those type of women in the past. That it came out a little bit, maybe towards the end of the relationship, or at a time in my life where I wasn't on my A game, or because none of us are perfect. So I've had elements of anxious and avoidant as well, even though overall I'm secure. So yeah, it's something to think about. Anyway, going back to the point, it's something to think about in terms of looking at the person and their knowing their romantic kind of personality, because with some individuals you're mistaking certain things, not understanding why they are behaving the way they behave in certain situations. Like an argument that can get blown out of proportion is because the person's letting their attachment style is kind of responding in a certain way. So I mean, it gave some really good examples if I could find some. Okay, I'll read this. It's not in regards to what I'm just talking about necessarily, but it says there are specific applications for people who are dating, those in early stages of relationships and those who are in long-term ones, for people going through a breakup, or for those who are grieving a loss of a loved one. The common thread is that adult attachment can be put to powerful use in all of these situations and can help guide people through their lives and to have better relationships. So that is like a summary of knowing of how important it is to know, about these attachment styles. So it talks about the dependency paradox. So once we choose a partner, there is no question about whether dependency exists or not. It always does. So when you're with someone, you are dependent on them because you are a partnership. You've come together. So although it might seem as if you are two independent people or whatever, you're trying to be that independent woman or independent man, you do have a dependency on that person to a certain degree at least. Does this mean that in order to be happy in a relationship, we need to be joined with our partner at the hip, or to give other aspects of our lives, such as our careers or friends, or to give them up? Paradoxically, the opposite is true. It turns out that the ability to step into the world on our own often stems from the knowledge that there is someone besides us whom we can count on, and this is a dependency paradox. So again, there is a paradox of dependency when you're with that person. And again, they stemmed it to close friends and family. When you're a child, for example, you have your mother and she's there for you. And a lot of kids, when obviously their mum leaves the room, they might cry, or they might be happy to go out and play, but they know they can always come back to that secure base of their mother or their father or their parents, or a family unit as a whole. So it's the same kind of thing in a relationship, romantic relationship. You've got that person who's kind of your anchor. They're there for you. They care for you. They love you. They're part of your life. So you can go off in the world and do what you need to do, but you know that you can come back to that person. So it's not something to be taken for granted. It talks about as well the Phantom X. What it says here is one of the consequences of devaluing your romantic relationship is that we often wake up long after the relationship has gone stale, having forgotten all the negative things that annoyed you about your partner, wondering what went wrong and reminiscing longingly about your long lost love. We call that the Phantom X phenomenon. So I don't know if you ever had this where you've broken up with someone and then you've idealized them to be this amazing person that you've missed out on, when in fact they weren't necessarily. So that's the Phantom X is all about. And then you start comparing them to your current partner or to everyone else that you come across and thinking you'll never find anyone like them. So that's a mistake that a lot of people make in terms of their judgment of past relationships that they've had. Holding on too tight to certain ex-boyfriends or girlfriends that weren't necessarily as great as you thought they were. And the reverse can be true as well, where you've let go of someone who was actually great and maybe you don't see it because you see too much of their flaws. And the book does talk about that a little bit in terms of how when you're in a certain situation, you're only seeing the person's flaws at that point. So there's a good passage here where it was talking about secure attachment styles, because this was the part I was most interested in, obviously because it's relevant to my own attachment style, romantic attachment style. And the chapter was just talking about how great secure people were, and I was just like, get to nitty gritty. I want to know what's imperfect about us, what's not good, what problems do we have? Because obviously I've had relationships and I've had, they haven't all been perfect. I've not been perfect in the relationships, although most of them have been great. There's always room for improvement. You can always give a lot more to your partner. You can always do things better that you didn't do. You made mistakes. You hurt the person. They hurt you. You argued. You did this. You did that. You didn't do certain things. You did certain things. And there's no perfect person. So I wanted to get to the nitty gritty. And I found this passage. It said, "A word of caution, however. Sometimes secure people, despite their innate talent for warding off potential unsuitable matches and making their partners more secure, can find themselves in bad relationships. This can happen not only when they're inexperienced, but also when they respond to their long-term partner's unacceptable behavior by continuing to give them the benefit of the doubt and tolerate their actions." So that's a flaw, because one of the secure partners are quite loyal. And one of the things is that they'll sometimes brush over certain behaviors that are really unacceptable and actually should be given a strike. And that can then lead to bigger problems later on in the relationship. So that was one of the interesting things. It's also said the bad news is that when secure people do, on occasion, enter into negative relationships, they might not know when to call it quits, especially if it's a long-term committed relationship in which they feel responsible for their partner's happiness. So those are some of the flaws that I pointed out about this secure attachment style. So it says, secures come in all shapes and forms. Many are good looking and sexy. Whether plain or gorgeous, we've learned to appreciate them for what they really are, the supermates of evolution. And we hope that you will too. So there's a lot of positivity regarding the secure attachment style, but they do have their flaws, or we do have our flaws, should I say, since I'm one of them. Okay, and it talks about the anxious avoidant trap. There's a little diagram there that kind of shows the behavior of the attachment styles of the anxious and avoidant. There's different telltale signs of the anxious avoidant trap. They call that one is the roller coaster effect. So this is closeness. This closeness, however, is perceived as a threat by avoidant partner and quickly followed by withdrawal on his or her part, only to create renewed dissatisfaction for the anxious partner. So there's that. There's the emotional counterbalancing act. So infrequently, avoidants feel independent and powerful only to the extent that their partner feels needy and incapable. This is one of the main reasons avoidants hardly ever date one another. They can't feel strong and independent in relation to someone who shares the same sentiment as they do. So that's what I was saying earlier about how avoidants don't necessarily date each other, because they don't have that. They want that independent feeling that they have and they get from other attachment styles, because obviously if someone's anxious, they want to be with them all the time, whereas they're avoidant, so they feel independent. As I say, number 3 says stable instability. The relationship may last for a long time, but an element of uncertainty persists. As illustrated on page 158, you may remain together, but with a feeling of chronic dissatisfaction, never finding the degree of intimacy that you were both comfortable with. Okay, so there are a lot of people who stay together. I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it in friends, I've seen it in family, I've seen it in many different people I've come across where they've been with someone for 4, 5, 6 years. They even get back together with someone, and it's like, why are you with that person? It's not, I don't understand. You're not actually happy with that person, but you stay with them. It's a trap that is being highlighted here in terms of the two styles of anxious and avoidant. But yeah, it's interesting to see in scientific in the scientific hypothesis. Number 4, are we really fighting about this? If so, you may feel like you're constantly fighting about things you shouldn't be fighting about at all. In fact, your fights aren't about these minor problems, but about something else altogether, the amount of intimacy between you. So that is usually the real issue in relationships. It's about the amount of intimacy. It's not about the mismatch of attachment styles necessarily. It's more about someone is giving more intimacy than the other person, or they're not. Both people aren't giving each other enough intimacy, or the intimacy isn't real. That is a bigger issue than the attachment style clashes that we have in romantic relationships, from my understanding. 5, life in the inner circle as the enemy. If you are anxious, you find that you're getting treated worse instead of better once you become the person closest to the avoidant partner. So certain things like the partner putting the person down, maybe abusing the person, things like that. So not so much disagreements and arguments. Everybody has those kind of things. It's more like a constant, putting down of that person, instead of building them up, instead of, dealing with issues, maybe it's something to really look at, I think, especially to a point so that the relationship doesn't become abusive, because you find that a lot of people get into these abusive relationships and they get trapped, because of things like this. Experiencing the trap. Number 6. So you develop an eerie sense that the relationship is not right for you, but you feel too emotionally connected to the other person to leave. So I hear this a lot. I've heard this a lot from women anyway, where they say, "Oh, I invested so much in this person, so that's why I stuck with them for this long." And I was just thinking, so what? You've invested in them? Are they a stock option? It doesn't matter. It's like, if the person isn't right for you, or isn't treating you well, or you're not happy with the relationship, then leave. I always think that it doesn't make any sense. Just to be with someone because you've been with them for so long, and you've invested time, and their family, they know your family, and you're all together. It's like, who cares? It's not about that. It's about the relationship between the two of you. There's a difference between, all right, we're dealing with a few issues, we have problems, we have arguments, our attachment styles are clashing, and you're just being with someone because you've invested in them, but they're not, they're lying to you all the time, or they're deceiving you all the time, or they're not treating you right. These are the things you have to watch out for. They're physically abusing you, even if it's just for a second. They slap you, or they push you, or something like that. It's like that's unacceptable. I don't believe in that. I do martial arts. I believe in self-defense. I believe in, if someone attacks you, you finish it. But you shouldn't ever be physically, abusive to your partner. You shouldn't really be physically abusive to anybody, but especially your partner. I just think that's unacceptable. I think that's a sign that person is really not right for you. If they've ever raised a hand to you, you shouldn't be with that person, or they've hit you, or they've pushed you, or they've, done something like that. For me, that's a big no-no. So there's a section in the book about reshaping your working model. So what it says is, in attachment research, working model is a phrase that describes our basic belief system when it comes to romantic relationships. What gets you going, what shuts you down, your attitudes and expectations. In short, what makes you tick in romantic relationships. So that's what your working model stands for. So in creating your relationship inventory, there's a part in the book where there's a table. I'll go over that in a minute. looking at all your past and present relationships and kind of evaluating them. So obviously you can improve your relationship, your current relationship, or your future relationships if you're single. So, what we remember today of our past is in fact a product of editing and reshaping that occurs over years whenever we recall that particular memory. In other words, our current experiences shape our lives' view of our past ones. By creating your own attachment inventory, you re-examine your recollections of the past relationship experiences from a fresh new perspective. Viewing them through an attachment lens will allow you to change some unhelpful beliefs that rely on those particular memories, and by doing so, reshape your working model into a more secure one. So on pages 168 and 100 to 169 in our attachment relationship inventory, taking the inventory is a task that should be done alone. Make sure that you set aside enough quiet time to work on it thoroughly so you really get to complete and accurate picture of yourself from an attachment perspective. Start by listing in the left hand column 1. The names of your romantic partners, past and present. These these can include people you've dated briefly. We suggest working vertically, one column at a time. Completing the inventory vertically encourages you to focus less on each particular scenario and to achieve an integrated picture of your working model across relationships. The more information you gather, the better. In column 2, write what you remember about the relationship, what it was like, what things stand out most, and when you try to recall your time together. Once you write down your general recollections of the relationship, column 3 allows you to take a closer look and identify specific scenarios that contribute to activation and deactivation of your attachment system. Column 4 asks how you respond to these situations. What did you do? What were you thinking? How did you feel? The lists below the inventory are provided to help you recall these reactions. Column 5 is a crucial next step. You will need to reassess these experiences from the attachment perspective to gain insight into the issues that affect your relationships. What attachment issues underline your reactions, protest behavior, deactivation? Refer to the list as a guide. In column 6, you're asked to consider ways in which your reaction, now translated into attachment principles, hurts you and gets in the way of your happiness. Finally, column 7 prompts you to consider new, secure ways of handling these situations using a security enhancing role model in your life and secure principles that are outlooked in this book. Okay. So just in regards of the secure model, that's somebody in your life, maybe a friend, a family member. It could even be someone like a psychiatrist, for example, who has a secure attachment style, who's in a good space, someone that obviously you can role model off. The book goes into details with that. I mean, I won't go over all those details, but read the book yourself. And it has this segment here. It's kind of like a chart. So what you do is you list your, like it says, it lists your romantic partners, past and present, and then it's got these different parts of the relationship, things to look at in those relationships. And I think it's a good little exercise because at least you can see what you did right, what you did wrong, how you can improve your relationship with that person, what it was really like, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you can actually use it as a tool for self-improvement, because one of the things is with relationships, it's a two-way streak. It's not just about you. And I think we've all made that mistake where we go in relationships and we want something from it. What do I want from it? Am I feeling this way? Me. But it ain't about me, it's about we. It's about you and the other person. It's about me and, my woman. It's not about just me. I have to take her considerations in mind as well. I have to take her feelings, her thoughts, her desires in mind as well as my own. And this is something that I need to look at. I need to see all the mistakes I've made in the past where I could have been a better lover, a better boyfriend, and I could have done better things for my past partners, and how I can improve myself moving forward for my current partner, and make sure that she's taken care of, so that I don't make those same mistakes again, or improve on the things that I'm good at. I think that's really important. So, well, the first column you put down the name of your partner, like I said, then what it is, or what the relationship is like, or what it was like. What current patterns can you recall? So what certain things are happening within the relationship, because that's positive and negative. Number 3, situation that triggered activation or deactivation of the attachment style. So certain things. So for example, if your attachment style is anxious, so it could be certain things like, oh, my girlfriend went out last night and she didn't text me. Oh, was she out with some guy? And it's that act of not texting you that evening that made you feel that way. Now, is that an absolute truth that she was out with some other guy, or she was cheating on you, or she was, looking for guys with her friends? Probably not. Maybe it was, but it's highly doubtful that it was. I don't know, in my experiences anyway. It is highly doubtful that that was the case. So you need to step back and look at it. Well, maybe this person might be an avoidant. So you need to know yourself and you need to know your partner. So if I'm my attachment style is anxious, and I'm gonna know I'm gonna feel that way when she doesn't text me. And if my partner's attachment style is avoidant, then I'm gonna know, well, actually this is her time to be away from me, to spend time with her friends, to enjoy time with her friends. She can have girl talk and all this stuff. She's not gonna do that with me. She's gonna come back to me when she wants to be with her boyfriend, rather than be have me there all the time and be texting me, and when she should be really spending that time with her friends and being present with them. So my understanding of her and her attachment style, and myself and my attachment style, can help, obviously. It can help our relationship so that things don't manifest into bigger than they should be. I'm like, why didn't you text me? And then she's annoyed because she wanted the time for her friends, and then we're not communicating right, so it becomes a big thing, and we hold on to it, and then we grow resentful towards each other. I think that's a lot of the times why people break up. It's because of things like that. Sometimes it's because the person was terrible, the relationship wasn't right, or whatever. But I think a lot of the times it's like two people, they were good together, but they just weren't mature enough to understand all this stuff. I mean, I can speak for myself. I mean, I learned a lot from this book. I learned a lot about myself. A lot of things I could have done in past relationships and I can currently do that can help, current relationship. It's really interesting. So yeah, so number 4, so my reaction, thoughts and feelings, like I was just saying, it's like you have to absorb your thoughts and feelings about what happens in certain situations with that person. What happened overall? How did I feel about the person? How did I feel when they did this? How did I feel when I did this and they responded this way, or they didn't do this and I responded that way? And understanding, well, what are the reasons for that? It's not necessarily because of a negative thing. It's because people are different, and we need to understand our different qualities and accept them, and to work with them, We need to know the difference between that and a lack of intimacy, or a lack of love, or a lack of, trust, or all those other elements which you should really look for in a relationship. Look to avoid in a relationship, or not be with someone like that. So there's insecure attachment style, working models and principles. Number 5, 6, how lose out by succumbing to these working model principles. So again, when you can jump to through in that example I gave, if I jump to conclusions and think my girlfriend is messing around when actually she's an avoidant type and she wants to be away from me and spend time with her girlfriends because it gives her a sense of independence, then I'm misinterpreting what's going on, and I think that happens a lot, and it's very dangerous. I think it's very dangerous for relationships. It's important to continue to educate yourself about people and yourself, so that you don't miss out on something that can be really good because of these things that we haven't been taught or we don't understand. You know, identifying a secure role model who is relevant to this situation and secure principles to adopt, how relevant who he or she is. So if you've got a good friend who's in a good relationship and they seem to always, do the right thing in their relationship, and they've had a really good, relationship, with someone to maybe talk to, look at, as someone who you can model on. What would they do? How would they go about it? What can I learn from that person? Sort of like the same way I would break that back to martial arts. That's my my number one passion other than filmmaking. If I'm doing jiu-jitsu, I'm gonna look at what my teacher Lewis is doing, or I'll look at someone like Marcelo Garcia, who's like pound for pound the best jiu-jitsu player in the world. Like, I'll look at him, and say, oh, he does things this way. Maybe I could try doing that. We'll take some inspiration from that, and I might look at some of my fellow training partners, who are belts above me or skill levels a little more advanced than I am, and say, okay, well, you did this move or you responded this way in this situation. Maybe I can learn something from that. So it's the same kind of thing. Overall, I mean, this book is fantastic. It goes into real details, and one of the things I like about it is it uses a lot of case studies for different types of relationships, different people, different couples, and you see these attachment styles in both men and women. So I think it's something that you need to read yourself, and you need to really go in depth and look and read the book from start to finish. Look at the case studies and kind of see where it relates to your current relationship or your past relationship, or even think about future relationships that you might have if you're single, and learn from them, learn from what's being said, because you see so many in the case studies, you see so many things like, oh, I went through that, oh yeah, that's true, I went through that, oh, I remember that was a bit awkward, oh, that was a bit annoying, or oh, I was a bit frustrating, and I was angry, I was sad, I was this, that, so it shows you that a lot of people go through the same kind of things, but at the same time, we all have to know who we are, we have to know ourselves, and then we have to know our partners. We need to know how they operate as well. Are they anxious? Are they avoidant? Or are they secure? And work with that. Versus as well things like the bad qualities or the good qualities that we may be ignoring about certain people that aren't necessarily, or may be the issue, or may be the defining factor of the relationship that makes it great. Because sometimes I think these styles could be clashing, or we're not understanding how to synergize with the different styles of attachment theory according to these authors, and that's where a lot of problems can happen. It's like what Sun Tzu says: you know yourself and know the enemy, or we'll swap the enemy for partner, and you'll be unstoppable. So, but if you don't know yourself, but you know the enemy, for every battle you win, you'll lose. And the same if you know yourself, but you don't know the enemy, the same thing. And if you don't know either, then you will never you won't last. You must know yourself and know your partner. And in terms of knowing their attachment style as well as their personality and character, which is very important. But overall, give this book a 5 out of 5, a must read. Definitely read this. Like I said, romantic relationships, really important part of the human experience. And it can bring you the highest highs, but it can also bring you the lowest lows. So it's something that is a part of our well-being, our happiness is we're humans, we're social creatures, we connect with other human beings. So definitely get the book, pick it up, and I think I'll leave I'll leave a link in the description below to that test that you can take, find out your attachment style, see what you are, and obviously you can find out what your partner is as well, if they want to get involved. And yeah, leave a comment, let me know below what you thought of the video, any thoughts you might have regarding any romantic partners that you currently have or had in the past, and your relationship with them. I'd be, if you feel like sharing that, I'm happy to get involved in the conversation. And yeah, just stay strong, and I shall see you next week for another book of the week.